Welcome to the Real Estate Talk podcast with myself, Oliver Ingalls, and my esteemed co-host, Benji Weinberger. If you learn anything from this podcast, we would love for you to like, subscribe, and please share it. Today, we're going to talk about a very hot topic, one which many of you have been asking. We're going to be talking about the marketing and strategy behind selling a prime and super prime home. We're going to be diving in to the tips and hints, which a lot of you would not know goes on behind the scenes. Benji, we ready for this one?
Oh, don't ask me.
Yeah. No, this is a good one. I mean, look, we have had a lot of people asking about this. What other topics of discussions and strategies do we employ behind selling these homes? So we're going to dive into 7 or 8 different topics and give you our advice. So let's start from the start, as we always do. You've just been instructed by a client, to sell a £10 million home in St. John's Wood, for example. The first step after gaining all the marketing assets. Well, let's talk about marketing assets. We haven't actually gone through that. What do we get marketing assets wise?
Well, the first thing I do is I will, as soon as you get the signed terms of business, you'll work out what your commission is, right?
And you go and spend it.
Yeah. There's rule 101, agency, what not to do.
Yeah.
Listen, I think the beauty of agency and why it can sometimes be difficult is there's no set rule, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's all, very bespoke based on the client that you're sat in front of. We have some clients that come to us and they say, I want to be really discreet. I don't want my neighbors knowing, don't want my family knowing. There'll be some people that are, the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And obviously when you're going through the first meeting where you're pitching yourself and what we can bring and what our USPs are, you'll obviously get an understanding of what route they want to go down. So in terms of what content you'll get, it differs. Some people absolutely will not want us to come in with our cameras and all of our army at DDRE to go and film content. They won't want that. But some people will be like, here's the keys, do what you want. So I guess in an ideal situation, you'd obviously have, photos, floor plans done, which is, the basics. And then hopefully on top of that, you would then have, the DDRE agents coming through, filming their agent intros, which is, a quick 10-second video, 15-second video, me personally introducing the property, followed by the pillar content, which is a beautiful, sexy video of the home, and the two marry up together, and then the agents get them to distribute across all of their social channels. So I guess for this situation, let's assume that someone perhaps wants to be loud and proud. And I think as a business, we probably do that better than most, and we've got really good reach. Yeah,
no, look, I think you're completely right. When we actually pitch and discuss with a client and give them our advice around the strategy to market, there are so many versions of that strategy. You're quite right. Some clients do want to be more discreet. Some are happy for us to go loud and proud. And actually, that's also dictated by us, isn't it? Around what we think is right for the property. This market that we're in now is a very difficult, saturated marketplace, and ultimately exposing yourself to certain elements is not what you want at the start. You don't want to have that digital footprint of maybe going on a portal straight away, and we'll get into this more. But I think in the marketing assets, what we're very good at doing, and we've read all the data on it, haven't we, around times of day to take photos, how to take photos maybe which are direct with that face on the house rather than at a slight angle, because we actually know that you'll get more clicks if it's a directly facing photo of the facade. We do dusk shots. We take a lot on the river, and we know that actually, when you're scrolling down the list of properties, whether it be a portal or what an agent has sent you, a dusk shot with really cool lights is going to attract you more than the normal day shot. And you kind of select certain lifestyle shots of actually the kitchen from certain elements, not just the kitchen as a whole. You take certain elements to it. And I think that's what we're quite good at doing. We're not just showing a home, we're selling a lifestyle, and we do that within the pictures too.
And also with the pictures, I know it's only a small thing, but I know it goes so far with the clients. We often cancel a lot of our photos because the weather
Mm.
hasn't done what we thought it was going to when we originally booked the slot for the photos.
Mm.
And a simple call of calling the client saying, I don't think the weather is best for us to have our photos done. Let's cancel it, rearrange it for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Small things like that go so far, and it shows that you're thinking about the extra step for your client.
Yeah.
But the thing that you just said, which was really interesting, was I said sometimes the clients want to be loud and proud, and sometimes they want to be really quiet. But I actually often think it's a case, as you exactly said, it's us guiding them.
Yeah. Agreed.
And showing them a different route to market, because historically it has been get photos, you get floor plans, put it on Rightmove, put it on Zoopla, and that is how you sell a property. And it's interesting because I'm not going to say where or what, but there's a super prime home that I'm pitching on in North London, and they've had, I think, 8 or 9 agents in. And I think I was the only agent that advised or explained what the off-market route was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's very much a case as the agent, as the advisor, to showcase what options you have.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, having said that, I think the tools that we have at our disposal, I don't think other agents have, and therefore they can't perhaps do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we're quite empowered to be as loud and proud as we want, or as quiet as we want, and we can do both very well.
100%. Yeah, mate, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's all in the small detail, isn't it? And we know that. Even when it comes to how many photos you show on the link or the listing, what order they're in, the mindset of a buyer, what's going to draw their attention in the first photo or two. You don't want to show too many, because if you show 30 photos, they've basically seen the house already. And all of these small little details make the biggest difference, don't they, to your click-through rates and actually attracting someone to pick up the phone to you. And that's what I think a lot of agents don't do, and they don't explain it to their client enough. But actually, if you sat down in front of your client and really actually said, this is one of the most important parts of the sale. The marketing assets is so important, and how you present it. But like you said, it's been so branded now that you just get photos, stick a floor plan on, do a quick situated on the best street in Highgate or blah, 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 southwest facing garden. And that sends out to the marketplace when, actually now drawing attention into blurbs and what your actual demographic of buyer is going to be and how you attract them. Your first line could be about schools.
And I think the key on that is to constantly be trialing and testing and seeing what works, and not just doing one strategy and then leaving it out there. So for example, there was a property which I sold a couple of years ago, and all I did was I tweaked the lead shot. You just touched on it.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was going to have that much of an impact, but I wanted to demonstrate to my client that, the market was obviously quite tough and things weren't flying off the shelf. But let's try and be proactive here and try and do things differently. It was bizarre. The next day we had, I think I changed the shot because it was part of a bigger development. It was originally the external of the building, and I changed it to the lead shot to be the swimming pool of the communal parts. The next day I had an inquiry and I sold the house to that guy.
Wicked.
Because we just tweaked something tiny.
100%.
And you never know what difference things will make.
Yeah.
I think it's more being proactive and trying to keep on top of things rather than just sitting back and forgetting about it and just
100%.
hoping for the best.
Do you know what's that? This just comes to my head. When I was talking about, we read the data on that, we know a face-on shot works better at certain times of day. But actually, we know that if we put you in it or me in it or Daniel or someone in it gets
worse.
even more. No, it gets even more though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We know that because we've seen the data on social platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, when it comes to, let's call portals, for example, or any listing, we don't actually put ourselves in it. But I wondered if we actually, with that front shot, whether or not, if we were in that front shot, first of all, they go, hey, look.
They're more likely to click on it because it's so different.
This is different again.
Should we cut this?
But again, this is the type of,
that's really interesting.
We sit down as a company and as brokers and advisors and sit down and study this at length and go, okay, how can we draw more and more interest? I don't think the regular 99%, unfortunately, of agents out there do this. They don't recycle the photos. They don't look at it every 2 or 3 weeks and change the front shot or change the blurb and change it again and see what's working.
But I think as well, the how you sell a property is changing.
Yeah.
I think and we will come onto it, the different routes that you go down. I think the reliance now on having to go on Rightmove and Zoopla is less of an importance than it ever has been, and I think moving forward ever will be. I don't know. I read an article, so wasn't there something about Zoopla that their valuation was just like 500 million or something, which was significantly down from 1.5 billion or something.
Yeah, what it used to be. Yeah,
I think people now don't need these portals. You can sell real estate through different avenues now, through the use of social media, one's network, calling people, ADVSR. You don't need Rightmove and Zoopla. So I think with that is the emergence of new strategies to market a home. And I think agents who have historically, as I said, just been Rightmove, Zoopla, photos, floor plans, whack it on, hope for the best.
Yeah,
it's changing. Yeah, it's changed.
Yeah,
it's not changing.
It's
changed.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what else can we do to sell off market? Yeah, as agents,
I suppose that's the first, after the marketing assets. That is our next step, isn't it? On here, we want to talk about off market, and look, you've hit the nail on the head. The monopoly now that the portals of having is diminished, and that might not be for everybody listening, because in our markets, especially saying that £10 million home, it's 90% of the time that buyer is not going to be scrolling down Rightmove or Zoopla. And they're going to be introduced via a third party, whether that be a broker, a lawyer, a wealth manager, their son or daughter, could be anybody that introduces it. We also know then that by putting it on the platforms, you've added your added today little tag on there, and that's like a ticking time bomb. Every day that goes up and up and up and up and up and up.
You're losing money. And
also your opportunity to get asking price, it drops and drops and drops and drops and drops. So if we understand that, and actually there's only going to be a 10% of buyers on that portal, and actually doesn't outweigh the advantages, then we don't do that at the start. Yes, we might introduce it at some point for maybe only a period of 12 or 14 weeks, and then we remove it again from the market. But at the start, off market is massive. And so that off market, we've got all the marketing assets, we've got our digital links, and who do we go out to? We start speaking to first of all, I suppose everyone in our black book, as in buyers or clients that we know are either looking or might be looking. And again, I don't think a lot of agents do this, where they will look and say, okay, I've got 10 buyers for that 10 to 15 million pound market. I've got to call those 10 buyers. Of course we will do that. That's obvious. But actually, the family down the road that we know that live in the £5 million house and actually have had their fourth kid, is going to need a bigger house, we can call them up. Or we can speak to the one down the road who owns 3 or 4 homes and he might want another trophy asset. Or this is just such a unique home that our type of clients won't need to buy out of necessity. So then we'll dip into that pool of buyers, and clients that we've got, and utilize our own networks. But then we go out to other real estate agents and advisors and tell us how you would utilize other brokers.
Well, it's when I was in my previous business, you were taught not to work with other agents. When you have a pocket listing, let's say you've got, you said St John's Wood, £10 million property. You're not going to want to work with other agents, give away half your fee and let them have bragging rights that they introduce the buyer. And also thinking, it's a short-term way to look at it, but thinking long-term that if another agent introduces that buyer to me and that buyer goes on to sell the property in 5-10 years time, they'll call the agent that so they have to pay away a fee, they lose market share, and they lose the potential of a resale. So I understand why
they were reluctant.
They were like that. I don't agree with it. I can see why a business owner would say, we don't work like that, because there's 3 bits of growing a business that you lose out. But I think that's very short-sighted. And I don't think that is ultimately the best thing for the client, the seller of that property.
Yeah.
Because what does that seller of the property want? They want to sell the property assuming it's not like a delayed completion and those sort of things. You are assuming they want to sell the property as quickly as possible for the highest price possible.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by having more attention, more eyeballs, and more people through the door.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by working collaboratively with the whole marketplace. So when I would go to pitch for new business, I would pitch and I'd say, because St John's Wood is a very, very competitive neighborhood, there's probably 15 agents on the high street, and then another 10 that aren't on the high street but operate in that patch. We would maybe have had 15, 20% market share, which is, we were market leaders.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking, but what about the other 80% that you don't have?
Yeah.
And my client doesn't care where the buyer comes from, what nationality, which agent they come from, which architect they come from. They don't give a shit about anything.
Yep.
As long as they get the right price and they get a good buyer.
Yep.
So therefore, it's my job to make sure that if I have to pay away a fee and I have to claim that they've sold it and I perhaps lose that sale in 5 years' time, I've got to do what's best for my client. And that's bring every mother F through the door, no matter where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And that is something that is, I wouldn't say has changed. It's changing because there are some people, I'm in WhatsApp groups where they'll ping a WhatsApp in and they say, clients only, no fees.
Yeah.
And I think that is a dying art of real estate, because you never know where the buyer's going to come from.
Yeah.
And you have to work collaboratively. And if you don't, you're simply putting your client in a bad place.
Yeah. I mean, I've given you a great example. I've got a house obviously down the road in Hampstead ourselves, which we're marketing just under 10, all off market. We've had, I think, 10 or 11 viewings. Now we're at 10 last time we spoke a week or so ago. And 80% of those, I think it's 80%, have come via 5 or 6 different agents. But actually, when I sit down with my client on Friday and go, we've had 10 viewings through the front door, they're over the moon. Because if I had only looked at my database, I only had the 2 or 3. So we would have only had 2 or 3 viewings. Now I've had 10. Like, that's exactly what we want. That's, and yes, we've had to speak to all of the agents. We've given them their own digital links, via their own branding. So we make it as easy as possible now to go out, because we understand that, don't we?
And then do you make it difficult for do you make the decision easier for your client not to have to disinstruct you? Because if, let's say, you haven't sold it, but you can demonstrate that you've gone to all the other agents and they also haven't come up trumps with the buyer, does it make your conversation easier to say, why would you change?
Of course it does. Because ultimately, you kind of play it back to them. If you ever have those conversations, it's like, I've been thinking about going on with X or Y. It's like, great, cool. But like, they brought in one buyer and now I've had 10. Like, they wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I had preview. So I've previewed every agent and, all the sales negotiators in the office around the house. We've given them their own digital link in their own branding, so they can send it out. They've got the easiest thing to do. All they've got to do is send it out to their buyers. They're incentivized financially because we're happy to give them half, 0.75%, whatever it may be, of our fee. So they're financially incentivized. And so I've got 100%, at least domestic at the moment now. We'll talk about global, but domestic exposure we've got. And we even talk about going to, emerging markets in neighborhoods around, like, let's say it's Marylebone here. I go to Mayfair agents and I invite them in. I go to Hyde Park and I invite them in, and Fitzrovia and Regent's Park, because we know that actually someone in Mayfair might well buy this property. So now I need all the Mayfair agents to do it too.
And it's really interesting because what I find is the agents that buy into the whole collaboration piece, they are appreciative when I call them about an off-market listing.
Of course.
Because I'm essentially giving them an opportunity to go and make 0.5%, 0.75%, where another agent may not.
Yeah.
And they also know that when we start off market and we are discreet, it's not on the portals.
Yeah.
And if they don't bring that buyer through the door on the off-market periods where perhaps the buyer doesn't know about me, that I have that listing.
Yeah.
If we go to social media and we go to Rightmove, which we'll come on to in terms of being a bit more overt, that agent, I think deep down knows that if they don't do it, we'll make so much noise around the listing that I'll end up getting the buy direct.
100%.
So the agents, that understand the collaboration piece are appreciative when they get that call.
Of course.
Say, I've got this off-market listing.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a personalized link with photos and floor plans, make it super easy, no friction for you to get it across to your client. You maintain that lead.
Yeah.
And then you can go and earn 0.5% on a £10 million listing, which is 50K.
100%.
Which I don't think many other agents are giving you that chance. So bring your people in and we'll go and do a deal.
And, one thing that we do now in London, and we've got 4 or 5 of them, are these WhatsApp community groups.
Yeah.
And so many of my friends and agents from the country, that we talk to and they ask for advice, we're saying the same things. You've got to start these communities. Like now, God knows how many £1 million worth of deals are done in our WhatsApp groups. Every single hour, there's at least 1 or 2 messages of, I've just got this new hot buyer, looking for X, Y, and Z, or I've got a new instruction coming to the market. And now you can distribute that to 50, 100, however many people you think are influential in that marketplace. So again, it's just another element or bow to your string when you're talking to your clients, that I can now distribute more data to a bigger pool of people. And ultimately now we've got all the coverage in the marketplace. Super strong.
So what else so that's obviously on a local scale, whilst we're off market.
Yeah.
Again, one of the things I touched on, that we have tools to our advantage that we can use that other people can't.
Yeah.
What would you say to a client who says, okay, that's great, you're off market, but you've only gone to the local agent?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Knight Frank, Savills, they've said to me they can give me global exposure. What would you say to them on that side?
It's really interesting. And look, we don't want to dig out the these bigger corporate companies, go in and say they've got 200-300 offices globally. Look, we have to talk about the reality, okay? They don't talk to each other down the road, let alone globally. Look, let's be truthful. We have to, everyone knows this watching.
So should we talk generally?
Let's talk 100%. Yeah.
We'll talk about the market.
So when someone says that, okay, and they got 300 offices globally, okay, that still means that, let's just say even that the global offices, they own maybe 7% market share, global market share. That still goes back to your original point of that's amazing, but actually you don't have then the 93% of the global market exposure, okay? And we are very lucky at DDRE, and maybe we should speak about how other agents could do it if they're not part of DDRE. But at DDRE, we obviously have ADVSR, Advisor, which has 7,000 brokers from across the globe, from every company.
I added a shit ton last night.
Like so many.
I added about 100 last night.
And it's constantly growing because we're meeting people and they're becoming onto our platform. So now, rather than just going, okay, 27,000 people, here's all your links, because it starts to scattergun it too much, we can start to go, okay, right, this could be an American buyer, this could be an Asian buyer, it could be X, Y, and buyer, and we can go into the more influential people in the market, brokers at Douglas Elliman, Kretz family, like every agent out there, including the 7%ers, the Knight Franks or the Savills or the Sotheby's, whoever it may be, and speak to as many global agents as possible and get them their own digital link for them to send to their clients. So now, not only are we getting the domestic market, we are now getting the global market. If I can speak to John Smith, who's the best broker in New York at the moment in time, and I can speak to John and say, hey, John, love you to be an ambassador for my property here in St. John's Wood. Here's your own link. And if you've got anyone for it, I'd love for you to send it. And he goes, thanks, Ollie. And actually, do you know what? I've had 1 or 2 clients who own properties in London. I'm going to send it to them because it's a touch point for me too. Like, it's amazing for him to do that as well. Of
course, it makes him look good.
Makes him look great.
So when I'm on pitches, I will explain to the person that I'm in front of in a very respectful way. And it's, as you said before, in terms of just the reality. So I know there are companies that have, let's say, 30 offices in London and let's say 30 offices around the world. If you assume each of those 30 offices has 60 listings, just assume round number, there'll be some that have 100, there'll be some that have 20 or 30, let's say 60. And then you've also got the 30 offices around the world. It's not physically possible for every of the 30 London offices to let the 30 global offices know about each of their 60 listings.
Of course.
So they can pitch that they have global reach, which they do, but the reality is the property will not get distributed to your global agents.
Yeah.
With the use of ADVSR, as you just said,
through
the 27,000 agents that are in those offices, in those global corporate companies, I can distribute the content to them through ADVSR. So our competitors will be going to pitch against us saying, this is what we can do. And I can actually go and show them, this is what I do. And I think it's so powerful when we say that on valuations, because there's lip service and there's proof. And through the dashboards that we have, which on the off-market strategy, some of our clients absolutely love, I can show that I've got their property in front of the person in the south of France office for X company.
Yeah, that's wicked. But so out of all the hundreds and hundreds of people that watch us, 99%, probably even more than that, 99.5% don't obviously work at DDRE and have ADVSR. Okay. Let's talk about how they should do it, because this is a strategy now which is global. Okay. And they can start implementing this strategy, at least, to tell their clients what they are doing. Okay. How I would personally do it is you can create, your marketing assets, either unbranded, okay, or you can add X, Y, and Z brand. So let's take John Smith, for example. I know John Smith in New York is influential in the marketplace, and I want him to distribute my client data to his clients, okay? I can contact John Smith and create the information into his brand and send it to him. You're right. You can't read the data. You don't know if John Smith sent it to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100 people like we do. But if you don't have the opportunity to have the tech that we do at this moment in time, it's still a great in-route for you to say to everybody, I will look at the demographic of potential buyer for this, and I can start to speak to the influential people in those marketplaces. And that doesn't have to be globally sometimes. The person watching up in, the Midlands somewhere might never have an international market, which means you don't need to go and say it if you're never going to get a buyer from that area. But you might say, but actually there's a lot of people from the north of England which are emigrating down to the Midlands, or actually they're moving out from the south because the same home is double the price an hour away. So I'm going to target that market because they're going to get so much more property, and I can speak to all the influential people in the Hertfordshire, Oxfordshire marketplaces. That's how they can do it. Do you think there's anything else that they could try and do, to give that coverage to their client?
I think it's very difficult.
I don't disagree. To distribute
the content, and I'm saying it from a place where I can do it because I've got the tools to do it. And I'm thinking, what would I do if I didn't have ADVSR?
Yeah.
It would be incredibly time consuming to collate the information and the knowledge of who the hell is the best agent in the south of France, who is the best agent or the best 10, 15 agents in Dubai.
Yeah.
Who's the best agent in Australia, for example. That in itself is time consuming. Then finding the list of people, then actually distributing it to them, whether it's WhatsApp, picking up the phone, sending an email, like that's a day job in itself.
Yeah.
Then the key part for me is, and I hate PDFs. And again, that's why I'm saying it's very difficult if you don't plug into what we have. You send a PDF out, you don't know where it's going, you can't track it. You can't pull it back. If you make an amendment to some of the photos, to the price point, you change the blurb, you can't change that PDF.
Yeah.
And it's not very helpful because I don't know.
Yeah.
You can obviously do those things. As I said, go on Instagram, type in Dubai real estate agent, there'll be thousands. You've got to go and sift through it. You can do those sort of things. You can, call us, call other people in the industry. Have you ever dealt with anyone in, you mentioned there's a number of WhatsApp groups. You can message in those, like who's the best agent in India because I've got a perfect property that might fit that profile, or an American buyer because it's around the corner from the American school in London. You can do those things.
Yeah.
But genuinely, like, I think, I'm kind of saying it tongue in cheek, but also I'm not. I think the easiest thing to do is to join DDRE. I'm kind of being serious, because what we have, I think sometimes we take it for granted. The whole off-market piece and having it at the click of a button, I think we take it for granted. I mean, I've sold the most expensive property I sold. I did it through the use of ADVSR. I've potentially got my biggest client off the back of it because I looked really good using that platform. And I could have done the work perhaps manually, but it would have taken me a lot longer, and it would have been a lot more difficult and a lot more rigid. And I wouldn't have looked as sophisticated to my client, being able to showcase that I can track all the data and I can give you dashboards to show how it's, how it's performing. And oh, by the way, there's zero footprint anywhere on the internet apart from the land registry, which is a public document, and some PR, which he kindly allowed me to do. There was nothing else on the internet of that sale.
That is wicked.
So I say it tongue in cheek.
Yeah. But if not,
I can't think what else.
An AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's given a real good detailed breakdown into off market.
We could go on for more.
We could, yeah. The next segue we have on here is a social and digital campaign. Okay.
Social media doesn't work.
Look, social a media campaign. Look, we can't bang on about this enough, can we? In that this is now the greatest tool for you to hit hundreds of thousands, millions of eyeballs, within one video, within one post. And that, again, is off the back of having influence, building influence in your marketplaces, and how key it is for us when we are advising clients and going into pitch, to say we distribute like 4 million on average weekly at DDRE, and to have that in our armory is such a powerful tool now, because some agents don't have that, and they can go in there and say, oh, yeah, I've got 400 on Instagram, and that's my delivery. If I do something on that, we can go out and say, look, we have another arm to our bow, another string to our bow, arm to our bow, string to our bow, which is digital platforms. Yeah. It's not just off-market XY strategy, marketing assets, PR, global network, la la la. We have a fantastic, array of the ability to be exposed globally on digital platforms, which, look, we have to be honest, everyone's at.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Look, I think, so I not to correct you, but I think we have 3.5 million eyeballs per month on us as a business.
Yeah.
Which I am confident in saying that that's probably the most in the UK as an agency. And, as I said, going back to the beginning, that our clients, based off what they want, we can pick and choose a strategic route to market. If they want to have a whisper campaign, we've got that perfectly tied up.
Yep.
If they say, don't care, here's the keys, do what you need to do, get it sold,
give me the right strategy.
We can be as loud and proud as we want to. And it's really interesting because even within that, even if someone says, I'm security conscious or whatever. I remember when I joined the business 3 and a bit years ago, there was a high profile person that we were selling for in Marylebone. And the property sold. It was around, I can't remember, 18 million or whatever it was. But they didn't want the address released. So we created social content, pumped it on socials, and it just said Marylebone. And then the price and some further information. And that property sold completely off market. There was no breach of, the address. Obviously, if someone inquired on it, we would have to, qualify them, do our due diligence like we would with any property. So that client actually was like, but I don't want to be loud and proud because I don't want anyone to know about me. We could still tailor to that.
100%.
So I think the use of socials is something that us as a business are very much at the forefront of professionalizing, because, ultimately, I actually saw a LinkedIn post from someone, I won't mention, an agent in central London that was disagreeing with our viewpoint of people don't walk into offices anymore. I personally think anyone who has an office, give up your office and put that money towards a digital campaign of marketing your stock, marketing your brand, your company. Because we work in a very international market, and therefore people, my phone's over there, but people live on their phones and are on their phones, and we need to be in their faces to capture their attention. And you can't necessarily do that by having a shop front, because if they're sat in the Middle East, if they're sat in New York, Miami, LA, what relevance does your shop front have?
Of course.
It doesn't. But if a video pops up on someone's Instagram or their LinkedIn, it might not be for them, but they might ping it onto their friend who they know is looking. That, I think, is where kind of things are going. And I think we do it better than most.
Yeah, look, I think you hit the nail on the head again. And again, with a lot of this social strategy, there's social calendars. A lot of people, they just like chuck it out on the internet, and hope for the best. It's like far from it. We will give maybe in the first week little teasers, little lifestyle shots. We might have the digital link that leads through to the off-market listing on a website, so they have to inquire. We might do a snippet of a video. We might do a sneak peek behind the scenes on our stories or something like that. We might utilize LinkedIn at the start, depending on the type of buyers that we want. Then we would go into pillars. Like, it's not just we're going to get loads of content and we'll just chuck it all out onto the internet. It's a very curated strategy over a period of time, because what we posted 2 or 3 weeks ago is out of people's mindsets. We always say people don't even remember what we posted yesterday.
Yeah.
So, keep drip feeding those videos, those pillars through the digital vertical assets, horizontal ones, lifestyle, different sunset, they will all, be driven then back to the listing.
Correct. And I think, and it's one of the reasons why us as a business, but also you and I, in terms of teaching and giving our tips back to it, it's one of the other reasons why we are so passionate about telling people to create content and to build their online platforms. It's essentially their shop front. Because we could get to a point in the next couple of years, it's happening now with some clients, where they say, what reach have you got? Here's my keys. How many people can you get my property in front of? And if there's someone that's sat there that's got 100 followers and doesn't post regularly, doesn't put their face on digital platforms and isn't building their community, they're putting themselves, or they're giving themselves less chance to be able to give a better answer to that client. If my socials are nowhere near where some people's are, but I can sit and I can say I've got just shy of 9,000 followers on Instagram. I've got about 6,000 followers on LinkedIn. I've got, a few hundred on TikTok. Like, if you come to me, that's what I can give you.
Yeah.
There's obviously people that'll be able to give bigger and better numbers than what I can do. But if your answer is I've got 100 followers, I don't use it that often, not arm to your bow, string to your bow. You're kneecapping yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're so passionate about telling people to get on social media.
Yeah.
Because whereas before it was Rightmove, Zoopla, now it's off market. There's the grey area of social media. And then perhaps if you need to, you can go to the portals.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that section, you're cutting yourself out of an opportunity of how you can sell your client's property.
Massively. And look, I use my LinkedIn as an example. For years now, especially since I joined DDRE, I've been hammering wealth managers and private offices and family offices and, basically adding them on LinkedIn, starting communication, taking them for coffees. And I've built it's probably 4,000 or 5,000 of my followers just on LinkedIn are wealth managers. So now if I can sit down with a client and I can go, look, I can now hit let's say 5,000 wealth managers, private offices, blah, blah, blah. But actually, those 5,000 probably hold access and the keys to billions worth of clients. Billions. As soon as I put it onto that platform, the value in that going out to the right eyeballs, or in my newsletter, which I know 4,000 of them subscribe to, it's going to hit their inbox every single Friday. They're going to look at it and they can send it out to people. How freaking valuable is that?
And I think is, incredibly valuable, and you've absolutely smashed that. And I know you obviously had an event where you invited a lot of them to, both with Rass's listing and your one more recently with Jess, which I'm sure we'll come on to in terms of events and open houses. But I think the key thing is we obviously don't go to valuations and say we're going to do this and that's what's going to sell your property. Like, I think we're very candid with our clients, and they understand that just because you put it on Instagram doesn't mean it's going to sell.
Yeah.
It's just you're bringing more to the table, and the more you have and the more you say you can do, especially in a difficult market, by the way, which we're very much in right now, where your other agents are calling your clients the whole time, trying to say, your agent, you've had it for 6 months, he hasn't sold it, you need to have another, a different strategy. Just by saying, maybe I'll do another LinkedIn post that's going to go to 6,000 people and 50% of them are wealth managers. It helps.
Yeah.
Stay relevant and showcase your client that you're doing stuff and you're being proactive.
Yeah, 100%. One of the a really funny story that happened the other week, and again, this is a great tip for the people watching. A client of mine received one of these letters through the door. I've got a buyer. Okay, I've got a buyer, and I was like, wicked. the client called me straight away, said, Ollie, I've just got this letter from XXX. They say they've got a buyer, they've given the profile of the buyer. She thought it seemed quite legit. Okay. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, first of all, I actually have spoken to that agent before in the past, but don't worry about it. This is normal. Let me call her. Okay. And I tell you what, as a special, what I'll do is I'll even increase my fee again.
Love that.
Okay. I said, look, I'll put in another 0.5%. I think I was offering 0.5 or something like that. And 2% fee. So I said, look, I'll offer 1%, okay, to them. And I tell you what, Mr. and Mrs. my client, would you throw in an extra £5,000 if this person comes and buy it? And they were like, yeah, do you know what, I would. So I called this agent up. I said, look, got the letter come through. Okay.
And you've already been in touch with them.
Already been in touch with them anweanyway. Okay. And I wasn't like, oh, why have you done that? You've just gone straight behind my back. I get the game. We get it. All right. Whatever. But I said, look, I will do 1%, okay, for you, especially on this occasion. Okay. And my clients have even said, if the buyer comes through and buys it, they'll pay you an extra £5,000 negotiator bonus. Right. You can bring them in whenever you want. Okay. I need the name. I'm not going to do any app checks or anything like this crap. Okay. You can bring them in whenever you want. When would you like to schedule the viewing?
Still haven't heard from them.
Right. Okay, cool. Let me speak to them. I'll come back to you. No problem. You know where I am. That was, I think it was start of last week. So about 10 days or so ago. Now I haven't heard back from that lady yet. And look, we get it. Many agents, part of their strategy to try and get on stock is going to be sending letters. I've got buyers around the corner, blah, 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 blah. The problem is you get quickly found out, like this unfortunately agency they've not got a buyer. Let's be honest. They've just tried to engage with a call to then say, oh no, we need to come in and take photos and whatever they're going to do nowadays. But what a powerful statement. Especially if you're in the home counties, and a lot of the home counties market, I know they go, look, we don't have the fees to split.
Yeah, we're 1% fee.
Right. But in harder markets, okay, which we are all in now, if you can dictate to your client and say, look, I might need a bit more fee. Let's say you're on 1%. Maybe that's the national average of 1%. Okay. If you went to your client now and said, look, it is difficult marketplace for £0.5% more. Let's say it's a £500,000 house. That's £2,500 extra on their fee. All right. £2,500. I want to go to the market and I'm going to go to these guys sending you these letters, and I'll say, I'll give you 0.75 and I'll take 0.75. Okay, we'll split it. But ultimately, I'm going to gain extra exposure for you. And all these guys who say they have buyers, if they have, we'll incentivize them straight away. And don't forget, you can do this from the off anyway. Not many of them do it out in the home counties. How fucking valuable is that? They say, yeah, Ollie, do you know what? It's super hard. I'll pay an extra £2,500 if you can find a buyer for me. Of course,
in the grand scheme of things, for £500,000, if you're employing the right person who's going to negotiate you a better price, they're going to... It's offensive that you don't think their value is more than £2,500. And if you don't think that, why are you hiring them?
Yeah.
But I think, it's for agents outside of London, as you rightly highlighted, it's difficult because I don't think agents outside of London buy into the collaboration piece because the fee position's so low and therefore they haven't done it. But I'm pretty confident that the agent that does do it, that sells it correctly to their client, has the fee position to allow it to do so, I think will slowly start. What was the word that Danny used? It wasn't was it erosion when we had Danny on the... Yeah. It will slowly start eroding away at that old school, we don't work with other agents because we're doing it. Yeah. When we started, as a business, it's been going for 5 years, and the model at the beginning was collaboration. You look now... So I've just been appointed on a house over in Queen's Park area, and I've sent the property out to about 75 different agents. Only one person came back to me and said, we're offering 1%, which is quite chunky. One agent came back and said, I can't work on that low fee position. Everyone else was like, appreciate it. Thanks so much. So I think the agent who does it quicker and faster outside of London will win quicker and faster. And everyone else who will historically have said, no, we don't work like that, will slowly start eroding and will have to buy into it, because I think that's the way it's going. I can't see any other way where you go to one agent, you're limited to his black book of people who doesn't work with everyone else. Mate, what seller wants that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think I've said that 4 times.
3 times.
Podcast,
I love it. It's boosting my ego.
Be your nickname. I think it's absolutely fucking true. And the agents in the area now really listen to this and take it on board and go, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go to a client tomorrow. I'm going to educate them properly, explain it properly. It will take time. It's not going to be, oh shit, no, I didn't explain it right. They're not going to go with me. Learn it. And I tell you what, you will mop up that area.
Well, you look at what
mop up.
Stephen's doing out in Hadleywood, Totteridge.
They're not used to that.
You've got a leading agent, a couple of leading agents that will work on 1%, 1.5%, no, 1%. And, Stephen's going out there and explaining the model, explaining the way the world works.
Yeah.
And he's getting 1.5%, 2% fees to incentivize the other agents, and it's working.
Yeah.
So I am very mindful of, that we talk about, how to sell a prime and super prime home. And I actually did a LinkedIn post talking about a sale that I did. And the first sale that I did was £812,000. And someone actually commented it saying, the majority of agents, that was the first one I sold. He said the majority of agents will never sell a property of that value. So I am very mindful that we're talking from a London-centric viewpoint. But for the agents outside of London, do it, as you said. Or even if you can only get 1%, for the first couple to build track record and to show that the model works, offer half of the fee out,
100%,
and go and, speak to the local agents and say, this is weird, this is wonderful, it could work, let's try it.
Well, look, mate, everything that we've said on this podcast is completely relatable to every marketplace.
Yeah.
Whether you're selling between 0 and 250, up to £1 million, 1 to 5, 5 to 10,
globally,
15 to 20, 250 plus, like globally. The model and the strategy is the same. It's just how you feed the market and how you dictate and talk to your client. But I tell you what, how refreshing most vendors would find, rather than going here's my pie chart and fucking seeing 20% market share and like, oh, these are the 6 brochures that I've sold in the past. You can go in there and educate them, tell them how it's changed from this archaic industry of the paper and the high street to collaboration and digital content and certain reach, and how I'm going to do it in different neighborhoods.
My alarm off.
Is that your alarm? It's always one, eh? Middle of the podcast. Well, the alarm has not just ended your parking allocation, but
sorry about that.
We are an hour into this, and I'm conscious that we are probably 15% of the way through.
We talk too much.
There is so much to go into here. We're going to have to do a part 2, where, again, the next couple of topics are epic. And I'm sure there is going to be loads of advice that we're going to give into this. So there's going to be part 2 to this.
Before we finish.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Should we do our quick fire question?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, of course. I mean, we need to. These is what everyone's asking.
Because these are the ones that people send in.
100%. Okay. The quick fire round to finish off with. Okay. This is quite a cool one. Benji, what's one word estate agent should be banned from saying?
Ooh. So it's not necessarily a word.
Yep.
But the terminology that estate agents typically use, for example, and I think we fall foul of it, calling things like a pitch, vendor, that agents use, but often you're an MA, market appraisal. Often the client in front of you is like, what's he just said?
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a specific word, but I think it's more using agency lingo in front of clients is a no-no.
It's also like we say price alignment, not price reduction. We would say garden apartment rather than a lower ground. There's different words now that we use apartment more than we do a flat. So I get that. I think that's a really good piece, and maybe actually as another topic completely.
Yeah, using motivated seller, committed seller rather than a desperate seller.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, cool. One piece of advice for agents right now. I mean, very broad from what we've been saying today, but one piece. Can I answer it for you?
Shall I answer and then you answer your
own?
Go on. Resign and go and find a new job. No. Stay unbelievably consistent.
Yeah.
Now's the time to dig deep.
Yeah.
Put your seatbelt on and you'll thank yourself in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Mine would be listen to what we've said in this podcast, okay, especially about collaboration, digital approach, etc. Go out, try it on your next pitch.
Nice. What's one thing you'd tell every first-time buyer?
Get your ducks aligned. And what I mean by that is have your finance ready, have your legal representative ready, be in a really good position to make an offer. That will help you massively.
So would that tie in with just telling them to have representation?
Yeah.
Most agents might not tell them that, but their representative would.
Yeah.
Which country has the best real estate perks right now?
Oh, it's a very good question. I mean, look, lots happening in London, obviously, with the taxation element and non-doms. Speaking to a wealth manager yesterday who was telling me a lot about Italy. We've obviously had actually a few clients move to Milan and stuff recently. They are doing I think you pay £200,000 for the year. That's your global tax. They're doing it really well. The market's being heavily outdated now with more buys there. It's a good time to buy.
Have you got any more?
There's one more.
I've got one more, and then you do yours.
Okay, go on.
What's the most shocking thing you've seen at a viewing?
Oh Jesus! Shocking thing I've seen at a viewing. That's a good question. I mean, I've seen shocking elements of the state an apartment or a house has been left in, and I'm going to say I've seen some shocking elements in bathrooms.
So it's not something
disgusting.
I saw. It's not something I saw, but the most shocking thing that I've heard on a viewing is that my old boss was walking to the play space, the swimming pool, and there was a glass door.
Yeah.
Going straight into the
glass door.
I think he's like cut his head open.
Oh.
Unbelievable story.
Unbelievable. Shocking. Right. Guys, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope that's been a really informative podcast. I've actually really enjoyed it. And actually even talking and discussing it, like we actually give each other ideas too. There is definitely going to be a part 2, probably a part 3, probably even a part 4.
Maybe that's why we're doing a podcast.
Maybe that's why we're doing a podcast. But if you have really enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe or share. We take time out of our days. We do love doing it, but we hope the value is there.
And send in your questions because we love using the quickfire questions. So if you have anything you want us to answer, DM us and we will get them answered.
See you soon.